Welcome back to the podcast. If you've been listening to the show for some time, you know that I am a huge mental health advocate. And part of that for me is just talking about it, talking about mental wellness, mental well-being, and also sharing my experiences as a mom and as a coach and my own mental wellness, mental health journey. And I do this because my priority and my goal is to just remove the stigma around struggling with mental health, and also to let people know that if they are struggling with these things, that they're not alone in this. So also, because I'm a teacher at heart, 14 years as a classroom teacher, that's also a big part of what I love to do here on this podcast, and just educating and all things mental health. And that's what I'm going to be doing today. I am going to debunk 5 mental health myths, and I'd like you to listen along and see if there are any that you hear that you've grown up or believe to be true over time. And I'd also like you to just notice what comes up for you if you hear something that goes against what you had previously believed to be true. I always welcome to have people reach out to me and share with me their own personal experiences. And I'd love to hear how you receive this. So for sure, reach out to me. You can leave a comment in the notes in the show, or find me on Instagram and strike up a conversation with me. I always love to talk with people and hear their experiences as well. So I am going to share 5 things that sometimes have been shared in the mental health space, and then also just share the truth around it. Let's dive in. So number 1 is everyone needs a therapist. I used to say this all of the time, and it's because I really did at the time believe it to be true, but also I at the time didn't have a therapist. So what I was saying was everyone needs a therapist, essentially, but me. And the truth is, having a therapist can really be beneficial for a lot of people, but not everyone. In fact, therapy can sometimes be harmful in some ways. And I'm not going to get into not all therapists are created equally. For the purposes of this discussion, I am referring to the therapists that know what they're doing, are well-trained and well-qualified therapists. So not needing a therapist isn't necessarily because you may have a therapist that doesn't have proper training, anything like that. What I mean is that there is a potential problem that can come up with talk therapy, because the tendency can be to focus on what is going wrong instead of what is going right in someone's life. So, of course, it's important to acknowledge the things that are less than ideal and even talk through them, but sometimes this can just lead to rehashing old stories over and over and over. And it can just more deeply ingrain those stories into the subconscious brain. And the problem here is that some of these stories may not even be true. Of course, the story has been taken from the person's perspective of an event, and it can be skewed or really just misinterpreted based on that person's biases. So, and also the emotions can cloud someone's perception of an experience and how they see things. So then they go to therapy and they tell the story. It brings it all back into the conscious mind. And then the more they talk about it, the more they think about it, the more it becomes part of their story as a person and as their experience. And maybe that's not necessarily helpful. Another reason why therapy might not be the best option for someone, not everyone's really great at verbalizing their emotions, or they don't know how to describe how they're feeling. A lot of the clients I work with, I like to explain to them that some people are feelers, some people are thinkers, some people are sensors. So someone who is a thinker, I have a lot of clients who will think things through, and you can hear them saying things like, well, I think. And then when I say, well, how do you feel about that? They don't really know, and they can't really come up with a word to describe it. And it's just because they're up in their brains so much. Then I have the clients who are the big feelers, and you'll hear them say, I feel. And sometimes when I say, well, what do you think about that? They don't really know. They just know that they feel it. So when it comes to talk therapy, it does require some level of awareness, cognitive awareness, but also emotional awareness, being able to connect the thinking with the feeling. You can learn that in therapy, and that can be really great, but some people just aren't there yet, so maybe they don't get as much out of therapy as they could, just because they don't have that access to that connection. And there are other approaches, like a more somatic approach, that could be helpful for people like that. Things like breath work or mindful movement. That's why yoga can be so great, because it will help when someone is moving their body mindfully. It helps them to connect their body with their mind and get into their body. Because if someone is a lot of a thinker, they may not really realize what they're feeling. So yoga can be great for that as well. So yes, therapy is absolutely great for many people, and I highly encourage exploring that route, but also know that not everyone is a good fit for it. All right, myth number 2. If you try harder, you can make your symptoms go away. This is just not true. Because depressed people, this is something that just really irks me. You should just try to think positively. Look on the bright side. But depression isn't something that you can think your way out of. It can be a chemical imbalance. It can be a genetic predisposition. It could be trauma-based. And by telling someone that they just need to think more positively, you're basically invalidating everything that they really know to be true in their body and in their heart. And that doesn't help at all. And these are things, what the person is feeling, it's not necessarily what they have control over. They don't necessarily have control over this chemical imbalance in their brain. Same thing for anxious people. One of the things that my girls and I kind of laugh about sometimes is when someone's like, you're anxious? Oh, well, have you tried breathing? I know it's coming from a well-meaning place, I really do, but breathing is not going to fix someone's anxiety. Yes, learning how to breathe properly can definitely help somebody manage feelings of anxiety over time. But unless somebody knows how to breathe properly, they may end up hyperventilating or even exacerbating the anxiety. So a quick fix like breathing is not going to help chronic anxiety. It can help over time and maybe be one little tool. But when people say something like, just breathe, that's not necessarily helpful. Just think positively. Neither of those things are necessarily going to help. There's a much bigger thing going on that takes way more intense or intentional approaches to even make some type of a dent or movement in. Myth number 3, high achieving teens don't struggle with mental health. And I say teens because this is a podcast about teens. This obviously applies to everyone. High achieving people don't struggle with mental health. People may think that they don't because they see on the outside that this person looks totally put together. They're getting good grades, or they're going to be going to a nice college, or they're super athletic, they're well liked, they're popular. There's no way they struggle with mental health. And I know that this can be an issue too when teens are looking at social media and they see somebody who looks like they have it all together and they think, oh gosh, there's no way that this person struggles with mental health, because obviously they can keep, all their stuff together. But maybe they're just better at masking it. Or because they're the quote good kid, They don't want to burden anyone with their problems, so they don't talk about it. They don't share about it, and they just kind of hold it all in. Also, a lot of high achieving people are perfectionists. So to struggle with a mental health, something like a challenge like anxiety or depression, it's basically admitting to being less than perfect. All of my high achieving clients, every single one of them, struggles with anxiety and sometimes a little bit of depression too. On the outside, they look like they have it all together, but on the inside, there's just this great turmoil. And on the flip side of that, low performing students aren't more likely to struggle with mental health. You really can't use achievement as a gauge for mental health. It's almost like a temperature check. You can use it as a temperature check, but there can be something underlying that is not shown in achievement at all. So they're not necessarily correlated. All right, mental health myth number 4. Mental health challenges comes from bad parenting. Now, you could get everything quote unquote right as a parent and still have a teen who struggles with mental health. So it's important to know that it's not your fault. Of course, parents can sometimes contribute to a mental health decline, but not always. It's really easy when your child is struggling with mental health to question everything that you've done as a parent and wonder, is there something that I did to create this? What did I do wrong? And just doubt yourself. But remember that for a lot of people, depression and anxiety are just in the genetic makeup. And also mental health challenges can be caused by something outside of the home or completely separate from the parents that maybe the parents don't even know about. And of course, there can be a correlation, but know that it doesn't necessarily, just like with the achievement, it's not necessarily the causation. And let's move on to the final one. Number 5, mental and physical health are separate. Now, this just is not true. The mind and the body are connected. So if there's something going on mentally, the body is going to be impacted. I know I've said this on the podcast before. When somebody has excessive, prolonged stress, it can really exacerbate physical problems like cardiovascular problems or a weakened immune system or digestion, a lot of stomach issues. And on the other hand, lack of exercise, poor nutrition, that can contribute to mental health challenges. So they both interact with each other. And that's why it's so important to take a holistic approach to mental health. And like I mentioned with number 1 on the list, that the holistic and the somatic approach, that's getting the body involved with the mental health. And that kind of goes with the therapy. That's why types of therapy that involve movement or experiences can be so helpful, like animal therapy, equine therapy, getting out in nature and gardening, things like that. Also, anything mindfulness based where you're connecting with your body. When the two are speaking to each other and supporting one another, there's going to be an improvement in the overall physical and mental well-being for both. That's really important to remember, no matter what. Whether you're struggling with mental health, it's important to remember that physical health is just as important as mental health, and vice versa. So there you have it. The 5 mental health myths debunked. I would love to hear what you have to say or think about all of this, and always would love to hear your experiences. If you have not grabbed my free resource, What Your Teenager Wants You to Know, but doesn't want to tell you, head to the show notes and click download. It's got some really great information about what your teenager is going through that can really help you support them and be a good resource and guide for them as your parent. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you next week.